Um, Thank you, Brother Faiz. Assalamu alaikum, everybody, and thanks for joining the session today. Is my voice clear, or because I'm juggling
Yes.
between two systems here? Okay. So, inshallah, today I will be talking about a very important topic that actually affects all of us in the way we think, the way we act, and how it impacts us. And according to this social thinker, Roderick Seidenberg, it will also determine our future, the future of human race. The topic of our talk will be based on, as you can see from the title, the concept of organization, which has its roots in rationalization, and that I will explore in next few slides. One might say that we have attended a lot of presentations about the importance of organization, but really those are just the application layer presentations. And in my opinion, most of the talk is uh, to the practical importance level, and it is superficial because it lacks the depth on how this concept of organization and rationalization has become so pervasive in our lifestyle. Like I mentioned, this presentation is primarily derived from the work of a very unusual person. His name is Roderick Seidenberg, and like Brother Fez was mentioning, that I'm a big advocate about on cross-disciplinary learning, and Roderick Seidenberg basically has this embodies this concept. He's not from a social science background. In fact, he was an architect, but he went on to produce some of the great works in sociology, and that's the difference between the intellectual and academic. The intellectual basically thinks and puts up ideas, whereas academics basically carry on the tradition of learning that they have inherited from the past. So, looking into, let me just see which. Okay, a few things about Seidenberg. He was born in Heidelberg again. Heidelberg is a place. University of Heidelberg is basically a place which has produced a lot of philosophers, and it's pretty famous in that sense. A lot of great thinkers have come from Heidelberg in the modern era. So he did his degree in architecture at Columbia University, and with the start of World War in 1917, he became the principal objector, due to which he was drafted into the army, but he refused to participate, because of which he was imprisoned for 3 years. And after coming out of the prison, he started working as an architect, and also started writing essays on arts and culture, and then also participated in a Federal Writers Project. Um, One has to also remember that um, his background in architecture also shapes how he views the work in sociology, and how he works the components of society, and how they work, how the components interact with each other, pretty much like an architect. And then he went on to produce two famous works, which now are not in trend, but back then they were very popular. The one was The Post-Historic Man and The Anatomy of the Future. So the question many people have is, why is he forgotten? And there can be many reasons. One reason could be that Seidenberg was an outsider to academic sociology, and his work was basically eclipsed by more famous thinkers like Max Weber and Jacques Ellul and the likes, who also worked on rationalization and how rationality is affecting human race. Um, Even though his name has disappeared, but we still see many of his ideas still relevant to this date. And with that, basically, let's get into the topic. Um, I'll keep this presentation a bit like open-ended, in the sense that if you have any quick clarifications, you can post it, and I'll try to see if I can see the chat here, or maybe if, then otherwise, if this question requires more detailed answer, I will park it towards the end of the presentation. So many of us might have seen this this paradox that get published on social media, that humans are the only creatures who basically cut the tree and basically turn it into paper and write "Save the trees." So this is the paradox that many times we have to adopt something which we are ultimately opposing, and that is the case with organization. Um, to to resist an organization, we normally have to organize and organize more effectively than what we are opposing to attain our goal. And that's the paradox. To oppose the organization, you have to organize yourself. And this we can see at many places. The one is like in a capitalistic setup, an individual workers who's dissatisfied with the corporation has to organize and form a union to fight the corporation. And forming a union means collecting dues from people, having funds, maybe have a bank account. Representatives in the union have to be elected, procedures have to be developed, and so on. So the union becomes a mini corporation in itself, and it falls into the same trap which it is opposing. And the same thing goes with the government. If you go to the US South, you find many anarchists who want little to no government. But even to oppose the organized government, they have to they have to form an organization, register it with the government, collect funds. So all these things becomes very paradoxical, to say the least. That basically organization breeds organization. That's the fundamental concept that Seidenberg puts up. That in order for to challenge an organization, you have to come up with a better organization. And organization breeds organization has more connotation than this one, and then this paradox, which I will dwell into that. Basically, the organization, many people like postmodern thinkers say that it's a conspiracy that some elitist and capitalists are basically controlling our lives by setting up these organizations. But if you think clearly, this is kind of an organic growth that people are basically becoming organized because of the efficiency reasons and because of the predictability and because of the calculated future. All these things are desirable, and that's why many people are opting for getting organized instead of opposing the organization. So in nutshell, organization has become kind of unavoidable in the modern world. So with that, like, let's dwell into Seidenberg's core thesis. The central point that he is emphasizing is that modernity is distinguished by the increasing dominance of rational organization over social actions. In the past, people did not think about how these societies are organized in a very systematic way. It was basically built on instinct, kinship, customs, and tradition. For example, nobody in the traditional world said, okay, we need to nap in the afternoon because it increases the efficiency by 30%. But it was just done because it's normally the tradition to basically take some rest in the afternoon before you head back to work. Similarly, if you look at a traditional society, if you look at the extended family, it's kind of an microcosm of traditional society. By extended family, I mean parents having their kids who are married, living in one home. In that setup, no mother-in-law will dictate rules for a daughter-in-law in a written form that you should be doing this, and you should not be doing this. Those things are not done. It's basically understood in an instinctual way, and also like people supported each other. One set of cousins would support their cousins because it's a tradition, and the implicit rationality was that they will help you out when you are needed. So the past was like that, based on more of like instinct and unwritten rules. But then what happens is, Seidenberg says that human beings started developing consciousness based on the accumulation of knowledge, and they started questioning inherited arrangements. Then what happened was they asked, whether a custom is useful or not, whether the institution is efficient or not, or whether the production can be improved. So basically, all the traditions were getting re-evaluated frequently, and also in the goals were chosen. The goals were not fixed. In the traditional society, goals was just kind of fixed, having a stable life. But as the transition was happening, people were starting to choose their own goals, how the society should look like and which direction should society go. So what that led to is a direction in which rules became explicit. How everybody should behave became explicit, and roles become specialized. Like somebody should do a certain job, and the other person should not do it. And even if they're because there is no rationale for two people to do the same job. Then output also became measurable. Like people started to measure how we are doing and how the procedures can be reevaluated. So four things happened: rules became explicit, roles became specialized, outcomes became measurable, and procedure was constantly revised. Here, Seidenberg is not saying that organizations came into existence all of a sudden in a modern society. No, he was not saying that. He's saying that ancient empires also had armies, they had bureaucracies, they have legal systems, and they have many engineering projects that they undertook. But what is distinguishing the modernity is the dominance of organization, dominance of rationality, both in its breadth and its depth. So what do I mean by breadth? Breadth means having an organization at every level, from school to military to government to production system to legal system to regular government, any prison system, anything basically is now in an organized setup. So that's the breadth. And the depth is that the psychology of humans also have started to think more rationally and more. They're giving extremely high weight to organization. Like if we do now, even Islamic in the Islamic work, we frequently emphasize that organization is important. Well-defined rules should be in place. So what is happening is this is the like a depth of dominance of rationality and organization that is permeating in ourselves. So uh, so that the central question is now is not whether organization is useful. I mean, clearly it is, because the output produced by the organized effort is much more than unorganized effort. But the question is, uh, if that logic becomes universal and it permeates our inner self so much, when efficiency, calculations, coordinations, predictability, when they all become the default standards for evaluating everything in life, that becomes problematic. And that's the direction in which Seidenberg is leading his readers to. So the next question is, what is a rational social organization? Um, so normally we say organization is where people cooperate, and human beings are social creatures, and that they cooperate in pretty much everything. But organization is one step ahead. Organization is just not people cooperating, but it's a carefully designed relationship for the efficient achievement, just not achievement, but the efficient achievement of a defined goal. So goals can be attained in a very somebody can do the job in 7 days, but that's not what the organization wants. Organization wants you to do the job in a most efficient fashion. So an organization identifies who should perform a particular task based on their competency, how these tasks fit together, and what procedures should be followed, and how results should be measured, and how the systems can be improved. So the boxes here basically shows the components here, the explicit roles and standardization. Like the McDonald's of United States would have the same processes as McDonald's of Europe. Maybe because here and there might be some changes in regulation, but most of the processes are standardized, and the measurement of the outcome is a standard feature of the rational social organization. Then coordination is also important, because as the number of people increase in the system, as the number of components increase in the system, coordination becomes a key thing. And modern systems are based on predictability. We do not want things to be unpredictable. We want similar kind of like crop production. We need a good like inflation rate, stable inflation rate. So human life is now more used to predictability than in the past. And then, as like I said, there's a constant urge to do the refinement. So in that sense, Seidenberg compares the rational organization to a machine because both are deliberately constructed around functions and output. Um, that did not used to be the case in the traditional societies, but as the rational social organization came into being, this concept of machine-like societies have come into being, and this is how the term cog in the machine, like the term that we often use, because each human being is like a component that can contribute reliably to the operation of the whole machinery. So let's jump into the differences between the organic societies versus rationalized society. I think I basically covered the first 3 points clearly by now. And the important thing which we have to reflect upon is the thing that I have shown in the blue box. Um, the and it's a point also to reflect us as Muslims, and as a critique of modern societies, we have to kind of analyze this. The traditional societies are usually backward looking. They look at the past as the authority, and for those who are not on our WhatsApp group, just I want to share that we see this discussion coming very often about like what are traditions, what is the importance of tradition, and how the modern system doesn't take that into account. Um, in a rational society, people are constantly looking for not on the past but on the future, on a desired future, on how they want what they want to attain in future. That's the prominence in the rationalized modern system versus the traditional system where past is treated as the authority. In the rationalized system, we do not look at the past as something of a model, but something to learn lessons from. So what happens is that shows up in how we view the change. In traditional societies, change is very slow. Even the if you want to make some change, you have to go to the traditional authorities, the graybeards, as you say, the elderly folks, to ask them to make certain change. But the elderly folks also, if they understand even the necessity for it, they would be very reluctant to make any change in the traditional setup. However, in the modern scenarios, change is nothing but a norm. It is not an exception. Just imagine how many times a company goes through a reorganization in its lifetime. They constantly grow that because they want to attain a better result in the future. So that's a very fundamental stark difference that I personally that hit me a lot as the difference between the organic and traditional society and the rationalized and the modern society. And this is one of the reasons I feel it is so hard for the Muslim nations, Muslim Ummah, to be able to compete with the Western powers because of this ability to make changes very frequently without regards to tradition. And But I'll not dwell into that because that's beyond the scope of the presentation. But that is something which I think we should keep in mind, that what we are struggling against in terms of like the rational modern systems. But one thing we have to note that Seidenberg is not saying that it's a story of a good past and a bad present, but he acknowledges that traditional societies control through internalized customs and primary relationships, but rationalized societies also control using formal institutions, laws, records, professional expertise. We may gain mobility and formal rights as happens in the liberal democracies, but they are very impersonal and very difficult for individual to basically bypass the structure that has been put around it. We might not realize that we are caged, like Weber says, we are in an iron cage. We have to get up and obey the law right from the morning. Like we have to get up, follow a standard procedure, go to work, spend a certain time at work, come back to receive pay, and life becomes very monotonous. So we may not realize that, but we eventually are also in the cage like the traditionals were. So that's what Seidenberg brings in contrast between the organic society and the rationalized society. So then he discusses an important term called organizational imperative. This is a mechanism through which organization, basically the scope of organization keeps expanding. Organizational imperative simply means that organization demands further organization. Just imagine I've taken a case study here. A large corporation basically sets up an organization. Then what happens is the workers don't like its policies, so they start an organization to oppose it. Then seeing these two parties kind of having a bitter friction, the state starts to intervene and starts to make laws and organize their relationship. And then what happens is the firm feel that state is unduly interfering in its work. So basically it complies and then also competes and forms their own specialized interest group, like what we call as the lobbyist. So you see, one layer is actually generating another layer. So it becomes like a contagious thing, like one layer of organization basically coming up with basically setting up another layer of organization. So in that sense, Seidenberg says that there is an organizational imperative that that one organization, this task, this path of going on the organization basically keeps on demanding further organization, and we go in a kind of a spiral loop here. And also Seidenberg rejects that this is a conspiracy. Many of, if you visit Substack or many of the postmodern thinkers, they believe that this is kind of a conspiracy that is there, set up by some elitist and capitalist or people or dictators. But the reality is that these things are natural. One organization basically sets up another organization, and something called as the organizational imperative kicks into action. So some of the things that he points out in terms of why organizations accelerate. There are 6 points that basically he mentions. The first thing is the population. The larger the population, the more number of people in action. So you need more organization to regulate that population. The second is knowledge. Knowledge now, when it develops, it is no longer going to be individuals mastering everything, but it becomes institutionalized, that some people masters like liberal sciences, some people do economics, some people do science, some people do math. So knowledge becomes more organized. And the third is technology. As the system improves, the production processes become more and more complex. And to handle those complex processes, there needs to be more organization surrounding controlling that technology. Just imagine how much organization is needed to cut a forest versus the organization needed to run a nuclear reactor. There's an order of magnitude difference that is needed, because the technology of nuclear reactor is much more complex and can produce havoc if it is not regulated properly. So with the growing technology, complexity in technology, we need more and more organization. Then in terms of communication also, faster communication accelerates both opportunity, and there is also we are so used to communication between, say, between the government and the people, or news or any means of communication. Let's say the Twitter is down, let's say Facebook is down. You can see that people are just panicking that the means of communication have gone down. So to maintain that, then we need to have good organization. Then the fifth is the pressure of all the resources. As the human life is becoming more comfortable and as the population is growing, it needs to be well regulated, and that demands more acceleration in the organizational setup. And now with the globalization, we see the supply chains are way several thousand miles away from where they are consumed. So there's a lot of dependency, which also requires a lot of organization. So so we see here a recurring cycle here. What rational organization does, and I think this is a very key point. I think which I want you to focus on. This rational organization makes greater complexity possible. They create more goods, and they and they make the system more complex. And that is one of the reasons why the human population, has grown so much since the 18th century. And then what happens is that complexity creates risk. Because the possibility of things going wrong becomes exponentially higher as the complexity of the system grows. But how do we manage that? To manage that system, we need more organization to maintain the complexity. So it just becomes a cyclic loop in which the modern world is basically looping here. Now, the three-stage model that Seidenberg has proposed on the history of human civilization is something which is kind of his original contribution, and was documented in his book Post-Historic Man. But before describing those three stages, Seidenberg describes two evolution. One is the biological evolution, which we are all familiar with, the Darwin's work, and which is which is highly contested in the religious circles. And he also doesn't dwell much on the biological evolution, but he dwells more on the social evolutions. Social evolution is the accumulated tools, techniques, knowledge, institutions, and practices that get transmitted across different generations, and upon which each generation builds on the prior generation. So that's the knowledge which basically keeps on building, and that is what is referred to as social evolutions. In his book Sapiens, Yuval Harari, who's very great at storytelling, brings up this analogy that human beings basically did not wait for their fins to develop to cross oceans, but rather they crossed ocean to reach new lands based on social evolution, based on the knowledge that they have accumulated, based on the knowledge of the material that sinks in the ocean, and the material that things floats in the ocean. So people were able to make their ships and set sail to explore new lands, and that's how people basically have gone into different continents in Australia, let's say in Indonesia, Japan, which are basically not connected directly to the Eurasian mainland. The point that he's trying to emphasize is that social evolution is much more powerful than the biological evolution. Biological evolution, he says, has happened over several hundreds of thousands of years, but social evolution covered much more than biological evolution in a few centuries. One thing that he mentioned is that fire and tool making capacity in human being set it up for the trajectory of social evolution, and other animals basically they did not have this, and hence they could not follow the same path that human beings have taken. So let's get back into the three stages that he describes. The first stage is the prehistoric time. The behavior is guided by instinct, customs, and the stability that we have discussed before is the prehistory. That's how the human beings have lived for a very long period of time, until last 3 or 4 centuries. Then what happened was, in the second stage, history, which he calls it as a history, begins when intelligence and accumulated knowledge increasingly supplemented instinct. Basically, prehistory was based on instinct. People used to sense that there is a way to hunt, and they basically and they looked at the land and basically settled based on whether it was cultivable or not. So those are all were instincts. But what he says, that history begins when intelligence and accumulated knowledge increasingly surpassed instincts. So knowledge, when it surpassed instinct, that's when he says the history began, and that's where he says the philosophy, religion, art, science, political struggles, and development of individual consciousness developed in the history period, when people basically, and that period can be traced back from, let's say, the agriculture revolution to somewhere near the to this time, even to this time. But the things basically changed, um, that in the sense that now we are on an accelerated path towards rationalization and organization, and Seidenberg imagines that the rational organizations may eventually become such that the humanity will completely come into its grip. Behavior will become much more predictable. There is no uncertainty. The conflicts will not be happen because the possibility of the organization, the presence of organization will diminish that conflicts, and there will be a rapid change in the characteristic of slowing down of history growth, because people have attained kind of a place where everything is kind of rationalized. After that, the changes will become very small. So in a sense, what he's saying is history is a a period between the two eras, the prehistory, where things were stable based on the tradition, and the post history, where things are stable because everything has been attained its rational equilibrium. So there is no need to be changed. So one is stable and three is stable, and in between is the history, where basically various philosophies, art, science, political struggles happen. And also we have to distinguish that this is not like Francis Fukuyama's end of history, but it is like basically it has reached that point because of an equilibrium, not because of an ideological victory. This is alarming in the sense that we may eventually lose our consciousness, which is so necessary for a human being, that we may not be able to make a free choice. Even now, we think that we make a free choice, but we are not. We are basically guided by so many rational thoughts about what product to use, what product to refrain from, how much we should eat, and what we should eat and what we should not eat. That it is shaping our mind so much that eventually, if this trend continues, then basically we'll become almost like the machine type. At least that's what Seidenberg puts it in his The Post-Historic Man book. So now let's look at the what has caused this intensity in the history of in the making of the history. The first thing that he says is the agriculture. The hunter-gatherer communities also had organization, but agriculture led to domestication and larger settlements. The hunter-gatherer society, they used to say that maximum there used to be 80 to 100 people in one hunter-gatherer society, and after that people used to split up and go in a different place to hunt, so that the two groups do not interfere. But agriculture led to larger settlements, and by domesticating plants and animals, human being became basically providers of their own, instead of hunting on the animals. So then food surpluses started to develop, and then also specialization of division of labor and specialization happened. Not everybody was involved in farming. Some people took up the job of like a tailor. Some people started to make shoes, instruments. So division of labor started to happen, and to do all these things started the concept of administration, taxing people, storing the excess food, having armies, and basically the role of the government started to expand. Um, so the point here is that agriculture did not merely produce food, but it created also complex societies that required new form of coordination over labor, distribution, and political authorities. So the next great intensifier after agriculture revolution is the period of scientific revolution and in the enlightenment. He emphasizes that a change in authority took place, the abandoning of the past traditions and adopting new methodologies started to happen during 17th and 18th century. The explanation based on ancient authorities, like the inherited traditions, faith, emotions, started to face competition from scientific methods like observation, logical reasoning, and repeated investigation. Even the master of logic of the time, Aristotle, whatever he proposed, his model of universe, how planets used to move, started getting challenged in the during the Enlightenment period. In other words, like the qualitative judgment that existed in the olden authority was replaced by cumulative knowledge, and pretty much every idea was put to test, well, as to whether it conforms with the reality, or it brings benefit, or is it turning it away from the beneficial outcome, or is it not matching with the observation that we see in the real world. So as we go, we he gives two examples of how the organized systems work. First, I already described how he equated, gave the metaphor of machine, that every component has a role, and each role is coordinated through a mechanism. So that's the metaphor of a machine that he gives. But the other metaphor that he also gives is the crystal. So once a crystal is formed from a liquid, what we see is it draws surrounding material also into a same ordered pattern. So rational organizations behave in a very similar way. A new technology, institution, or regulatory system doesn't develop in isolation. For example, now AI is being developed, but as soon as AI is being developed, now there is a huge talk about how to regulate it. What are the organizations that are needed to control it? And already there are talks about like forming a consortium of AI companies who should basically report what they are doing good and what they are doing wrong. And that's how we come to find out that like OpenAI's agents started hacking unknowingly, or cloud did something. So all these things are need a lot of regulations. So this is the analogy of crystal, that everything around the crystal becomes more and more organized. So let's look at a few of the things that happens in the modern world that we think that were previously taken care by the traditional societies. For example, we have this family and community used to take care of the child care, health care, elder care, education, welfare, and corrections. Now all of these things are basically taken over by the formal institutions now. Child care, both husband and wife go to work, and they earn a lot of money, so they don't mind spending something on the kindergarten and child care. So the rationality is that we are involved in more productive activities and involved in more accumulation of wealth. And childcare, the amount of money that goes to childcare is negligible compared to what we are doing. Same thing with the healthcare. Now people are buying insurance, and that insurance is governed again by an organization. Earlier it used to be not there. Like people used to go to just Hakim or an or a Ayurveda, like somebody who has some knowledge of Ayurveda or something, and then get the medicine out of it. But all this changed in the modern system. Elder care too. Again, Yuval Harari mentions about like an example of a lady who is earning like $250,000 in Silicon Valley. Suddenly their mother develops dementia and needs help. So what should she do? Should she leave her $250,000 job and take care of mother, or she should go and hire a caretaker and pay $25 per hour on her salary, for the salary of the caregivers? So these are the things, and naturally the second is being preferred these days. Same thing with the education. Now education is being not handled by voluntarily, but now it's being organized and standardized by government. Same thing with the welfare. Rabindranath Tagore used to talk about the Samaj taking care of the people at large, but now there are social security systems, there are unemployment insurances that have started to basically take care of what traditional societies used to do with it. In terms of corrections also, the punishment used to be decided by a panchayat as to what the punishment should be, but now you have standardized ways of deciding disputes. There are laws, there are lawyers basically who basically fight and try to again, organization of legal stature and the organization of bar of the lawyers, they all are involved in now corrections, like how the punishment systems. So so this is a thing to reflect here, that in modern world individuals are surrounded by a web of institutions, some of them which I have listed here, and modern life depends highly, very much on these systems. But the individual usually understands only a small part of how they operate. They do not have much visibility of how everything works. A worker may know only specialized role of what they do, but not the entire production network. For example, I've come from the Qualcomm background, an Apple background, but I do not know the entire supply chain where the things are coming from, because the employers usually do not list those things to their employee. Even the senior administration doesn't know much about one section of a much larger corporation. So Seidenberg here distinguishes two things. One is the individual intelligence, and the second is the social intelligence. So what is individual intelligence? Individual intelligence is the individual's ability to know things which are around us. And in that sense, individual mental capacity has not expanded at the same rate as the accumulated social knowledge of the organization. So now that's why we see that people in quantum mechanics don't know much about what is happening in, let's say, in the economic domain, and an economist doesn't know what happens in, let's say, much in the political science domain. So things have become atomized, and our individual mental capacity has kind of become very little, but at the same time social knowledge has grown a lot more. So there's a contradiction that is happening between individual mental capacity and accumulated social knowledge. So what happens is that the system becomes more and more capable of doing things, while each person's participation becomes smaller and smaller. So, but however, it's not all negative. We can also benefit from knowledge which we do not possess, and from institutions we cannot independently reproduce. So in that sense, we are kind of an unthinking beneficiary. For example, somebody comes to US, they don't have to think about like how the social security system works and how unemployment benefit works. Those are all the things which have already been thought for you, and those mechanisms are already in place. The banking system is in place, the production system is in place, the stores are in place. So in that sense, there is also an advantage that of this expanded accumulated social knowledge, that it is that the individual is having a reduced mental capacity, but they are still able to benefit from it. But the problem is that this creates dependency, a lot of dependency on each institution, and it also creates a sense of alienation. The individual may feel free that they can make personal choices, yet they are powerless in relation to the structures that determine their employment, their credit history, their healthcare system, their communications, and the political choices that we make. For example, somebody in US can only possibly vote for two major parties. There's no third party. Yeah, Green Party exists, but it never has been able to make any success there. So the whole system becomes kind of a narrow for human being in that sense. So there are both positives and the negatives, but what it means to be human is kind of the unpredictability, and all these things are getting kind of lost, to the sense that there are tests which claim that they will tell you what is the most likely disease that you are going to afflict. So all these things are basically going into the realm of machine-like treatment of human being, instead of treating humans as humans with their own surprises and good and bad surprises. So that thing is being lost in the modern world. So in a sense, I will, since we are coming close to time, I will see that the means are becoming more and more valuable than the ends, to the point that means itself is becoming a part of ends. Instead of separating the two, they are heavily leaning towards the ends. Seidenberg also discusses that difference between intelligence, wisdom, and knowledge, and says that intelligence is like a tool. It's basically directionless. It can be used to attain both good things and bad things, and it basically is agnostic to the ends, and that's very dangerous. The way the intelligence is being incorporate it in the rational world. Um, then he describes what we already kind of now know better, that we are all kind of index tabulated numbers. We have there's a database of birth, there is a database of income and occupation and habits. So at that time, I think he died in 2003, but way before that he has written his books, and in that he predicted that eventually human beings become more and more of a data rather than a human being, uh, and uh, uh, and that the predictability becomes a form of power for the organization to regulate. The governments can regulate better using these data. So many things, many concerns that we raise about privacy and other things were seen way back by Seidenberg in before 1960, before 1970s, 60s. So what is a prehistoric man? So prehistoric man is basically, he's saying that they become, they are integrated fully into the organization. Their behavior becomes very predictable, and they are very comfort oriented. So what that does is they have less autonomy of what they can do, even though they think that they have more autonomy, but in practice, in reality, their autonomy keeps shrinking, and there is less historic, like there is no like I was mentioning, that there is no battle of ideologies, and all these things will kind of shrink, and we will all become kind of like more of a cog in a machine. So we basically have very limited things that we can do, and our lives will become more very mechanical. That's what he's referring to when he's referring to the post-historic man. So there are other giants basically who have kind of eclipsed Seidenberg. One is Max Weber, and inshallah we'll have some presentation in mind on this topic also. Max Weber's work on rationalization, bureaucracy, and his iron cage concept. And there is a Jacques Ellul, he's a French social thinker. He's basically a technocrat who says that technology will eventually determine the fate of the society. So there are two very overlapping works that on whose boundary Seidenberg lies. And in the age of AI, this his work becomes even more important, because of how we are moving more and more towards mechanistic thinking, use of AI for everything, from writing a love letter to writing a formal letter to writing a letter for disagreement. So in that sense, in the age of AI, Seidenberg's post-historic phenomena is kind of coming to somewhat fruition. So lastly, I'll finish this by evaluating Seidenberg's work. What he sees clearly is that organization is a historic force in its own right, how the human beings have kind of evolved from prehistoric man to the current modern societies, and that complexity repeatedly produces demands for more coordination, like the organization breeds more organization, and the organizational imperative that I discussed. And technical efficiency can coexist with irrational ends. The one thing that I kind of did not touch well is that the means might be more efficient, but the ends might be harmful. This is what I think he discusses at length, and there are many people like Weber, as well as many sociologists who have discussed that the ends might be irrational, but the means might be rational. So that's one of the things that he sees very clearly. And then the use of data and persuasion becoming tools of organization control, that also he sees very clearly. But where he might not be correct is that his theory is too deterministic. He's predicting way too much in the past, and that might not come true. Many people who make predictions, like Karl Marx also, their theory become too deterministic, and that might not, but that might make them look kind of not wise in future. And the resistances and institutional diversity may be underestimated. Each institution might employ its own rationality, and we might not converge towards one big rational organization, but the multiple rational organizations basically who compete against one another. So that's a possibility which he doesn't take into account. Then organization can also enlarge freedom and capacity in some aspects. And the post-historic future is something which is difficult to both test or falsify. It has to be like some futuristic prediction which may or may not come true. So overall, I found that this architect has basically presented some of the things, very thoughtful things that go beyond our understanding of normal organizations. And with that, I will end my presentation. Uh, I think it was too much material. Usually, the subject in sociology is kind of complex and it's hard to encapsulate without quoting their exact text and discussing on that. But that takes a lot of time. So I've tried to compress this in an hour presentation, and hopefully it gave a good idea about the concept of organization and rationality. So with this, I'll end the presentation and open to any discussions.